Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane, and it's the morning of Wednesday, the 28th of August, 2019. And this is the last time in which I should be taking a break from taking a break. As on the next Monday, I should be back in the fray with live streams every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Well, it is totally fracking miserable here in the north of England right now. It's cold, it's wet, but we did have a glorious bank holiday, and I trust that you've made the most of what varied summer that we've had. I know the climate alarmists didn't, because every time the temperature climbed above 80 degrees, they went into fear mode. Well, that's very unfortunate, and maybe eventually they'll come to the realization of what's really occurring, but they have to get their heads out of the lamestream media. Anyway, I will actually be back in the studio tomorrow with an episode of Humanity versus Insanity, where I shall be sharing some information that has been dropped into my lap regarding the agenda to demonize the anti-vaccine community as domestic terrorists. And this is being ramped up at an enormous rate, and the information that I'm going to share tomorrow evening on Humanity vs. Insanity will absolutely rock your world. And you won't be surprised, of course, because you'll see how all the pieces join together to form an extremely disturbing picture where the global parasites are continuing to use humanity as lab rats, effectively. But there's too many lab rats, and so consequently they're looking to try to cull the herd, as it were. So join me tomorrow night at 7:30 on UK Column, or on, of course, this YouTube channel here. But meanwhile, of course, the great news is that, as predicted so many times over the last 7 years, Quadrilla have once again demonstrated that they are a cowboy outfit, not fit for purpose, and the toxic sociopath Francis Egan, who sits at the helm of Quadrilla, should be investigated for fraud. This parasite has had access to the data since taking on the role of CEO of Quadrilla way back in the back end of 2012. He knew fine well that basically fracking should never be undertaken in an environment so heavily faulted, so heavily geologically faulted as the UK. And of course, he inherited an outfit that had already been responsible for triggering the seismic events back on April 1st and May 27th, 2011, which led to the moratorium being put in place, which remained until it was lifted in December of 2012. So when Quadrilla went back to Balkham in mid 2013, Francis Egan was well and truly at the helm, and of course the protests at Balkham started to give an indication of the magnitude of concern around the country. And of course that concern has increased as we've seen campaigns at Balkham, Barton Moss, Crawberry Hill, Upton, where else? West Newton, and then Kirby Misperton, and then Misson Springs and Tinker Lane. And in every case, the local community, supported by the protection community, have attempted to resist this toxic industry. And of course the local authorities in a number of cases have basically rejected the applications to drill and frack in their communities, only for it to be overturned by central government. Well, you know, we are all obviously aware that the Tory government in particular is a corporatist tool. and the Tories will do anything that basically the corporatists, particularly those who are prepared to donate significant chunks of funds either to the Tory party or to individual MPs, then they will do their bidding. But now, having triggered, I think it's something in the region of close to 100 seismic events at Prestonby Road, literally in the last 10 days or so, most of them, of course, literally micro-seismic. But the use of the term micro-seismic is being abused, because basically once it gets above a real zero, then it's no longer micro-seismic, it's the minus numbers that are the micros. But of course, Quadrilla triggered a 2.9 at 8:31 on Bank Holiday Monday, despite them saying, oh, but we're not fracking. No, but you'd have to be completely out of it not to comprehend that it was effectively a trailing event from the fracking of the previous week. And 2.9 is of a significant order of magnitude greater than the 2.3 which led to the moratorium being put in place back in 2011. So the bottom line is fracking should be now dead and buried, and it's great to see the people of the area around Prestonby Road finally realizing that everything that they have been told over the last 6 years has actually come to be true. And now basically it's down to the local community, and Mark Menzies, of course, smelling that if he doesn't now get off that fence that he's straddled for the last 6 years, then there's the very high risk that he might lose votes. But of course, that is one of the safest Tory seats in the country, so probably low risk there. But he has realised that the zeitgeist of the moment means that he has to be now speaking out against this industry and calling basically for not just a moratorium, but for an outright ban on this process. But of course, this now opens the door for what many of us have suggested is the real agenda, and that is, if fracking is finally banned in the UK, then there is a network of deep boreholes that sociopaths such as Francis Egan and Jim Ratcliffe, would be looking to maximise in terms of revenue. And of course, this is where the opportunity to bury the toxic nuclear waste comes into play. So it's not over yet. These boreholes not only need to be decommissioned, but the whole area needs to be returned, just as at Crawberry Hill, to its former usage, to ensure that the sociopaths can't return at some future date and start dropping nuclear waste down the wells. And of course, under the Modified Infrastructure Act of 2015, there's no requirement for them to consult with the local community. They can just do it surreptitiously. So the only way to make sure it doesn't happen is to return the land to its former usage. So the Oil and Gas Authority have announced that there is an indefinite suspension of fracking, and no doubt the likes of Jim Ratcliffe and iGas are a bit concerned that it might be the end of their foray into this arena. But hey, just how long can you keep kicking this can down the road? So that's fracking. And Humanity versus Insanity tomorrow, looking at the attempt to demonise even more so the anti-vaccine campaign. And then of course we have 5G. And yesterday in I believe it was the Daily Mail, an article announcing that basically the telecoms companies are looking to persuade the government, in other words, buy the opportunity to get even greater heights of towers approved as nationally significant infrastructure projects. So not having to go through the planning process. So at the moment, telecoms companies can literally erect a tower in an urban area up to 75 feet. Once they've got access to that land, they don't have to get any planning permission, and just under 85 feet in rural areas Well, the telecoms companies are now putting propositions forward that they need basically double that, particularly in rural areas. And so the government has announced that it's looking for some test rural areas to put up these massive phone masts on the basis, of course, that it will provide greater internet access and, of course, increase the speed with which people get sick. But that, of course, is all being denied, despite the fact that the industry itself has recognised that there is not a single independent study proving 5G frequencies to be safe. So once again, humanity are the lab rats here. Well, 5G Is It Safe tour kicks off in a little over a week now. It starts in Appledore in North Devon on Saturday the 7th of September. And then in the first week, on the following Monday, kicks off in Bristol at the Holiday Inn, then in Plymouth on the Tuesday, Bournemouth on the Wednesday, Portsmouth, Hayling Island on the Thursday, and then Brighton on the Friday. And the full listing of the 23-date 5G Is It Safe tour are on the two websites, my website ianrcrane.com and alternativeview.co.uk. And we're still looking for people who are willing to distribute or be a hub for distribution of flyers for the events in their respective areas. So if you are interested in helping to raise awareness of these events in your areas, please drop me an email or a private message, include your address, and we will arrange for the printers to send you 1,000 flyers. And obviously, if you can get some help to distribute, and anyone else who contacts in that area, we'll put them in touch with you to help with the distribution. But as with fracking, the only way that something of the ilk of 5G actually gets stopped is for a groundswell amongst the local population and for the elected representatives to realise that this is something they can't ignore. And let's not forget that Brussels has stated that they will not be permitting 5G to be implemented within the city limits because it's not proven to be safe. And we will be showing evidence around the world, from around the world, where communities are becoming increasingly concerned at the cancer clusters that have manifested since the erection of mobile phone masts in their community. And some of these certainly predate 5G. So this is a military grade microwave technology that has not been properly tested. The military are well aware of the effects that it has on service personnel, and they desperately try and keep that quiet because they don't want it to affect their recruitment. But that's why we have such phenomenal problems with PTSD, self-harming and suicide amongst service personnel. So the 5G tour is certainly going to be my focus through September and into early October, and that will give us the run up to AV 10.1. And we have some outstanding speakers at AV 10.1, and I'm delighted that David Dubine will be returning from Taiwan back to the UK to present his latest insights at AV 10.1. And of course, David has been very much on point of trying to raise awareness that the climate extremes have nothing at all to do with humanity, but they are related to the solar minimum, this 400-year cycle, which the climate alarmists refuse to acknowledge or even look at the evidence. And even those who purport to be science-based in terms of their views absolutely refuse to look at the plethora of data that suggests that the global parasites have known about this imminent natural phenomena for some time, but of course have used the opportunity to blame humanity so that they can tax you for it. and you notice that the global parasites still carry on with whatever it is that they do in their lives, using whatever means of transport they need to use, whilst virtue signaling that they're taking action to prevent the climate catastrophe. Yet, they're not going to suffer. Basically, it's only the poor people who will suffer even more. And of course, within a year or so, may not be able to afford basic or anything more than basic foods, because as food prices increase, as the shortages kick in, then obviously various excuses will be made. I mean, Trump has recently announced that the US has a grain surplus, which Japan has offered to buy in full. And it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out, because there are certainly some views that the US harvest has been a fraction of what it should have been, thanks to the extreme weather brought about by the change in the jet streams, brought about by the solar minimum. So if you think this is a complete crock, then obviously you can either do the research, or you can come along to AV 10.1 in London on Sunday the 27th of October and hear and grill David Dubine for yourself. But of course, those who are locked into the construct of anthropogenic climate change daren't go along, because they might actually hear something that rocks their worldview. Well, finally this morning, a couple of upcoming events this weekend. John Smith will be convening a couple of common law courts. The first will be at Guildford, the Holiday Inn in Guildford in Surrey, on Saturday, and that will commence at 11 a.m. And the common law court will be looking at the ongoing persecution of David Noakes, Lynn Thayer, who of course is currently incarcerated in Fouilles-Mérion prison, one of the largest prisons in Europe, also extremely overcrowded, 144% of capacity apparently, and where Lynn is now incarcerated awaiting a hearing in France following her extraordinary rendition by the corrupt British judiciary. So if you'd like to go along and witness the common law court process, or even perhaps participate in the common law court process and contribute to the evidence that will be heard regarding the persecution of David Noakes, Lynn Thayer, and the suppression of GcMAF, then go along to the Holiday Inn at Guildford on Saturday. And then the following day in Manchester, at the Manchester Art Gallery, the common law court will be convened to look at the unlawful administration of HPV vaccines. And of course, this is going to be a very interesting common law case, especially in light of what I share on tomorrow night's episode of Humanity versus Insanity. So, meanwhile, I trust that you've survived the school holidays, and I trust that you've managed to get some rest and respite and relaxation, because the autumn is going to be extremely challenging. Of course, the socio-psychopathic corporatists don't want you to get involved. They don't want you to participate in anything. They just want you to go about your normal daily slave routine. Get up, have breakfast, go to work, come home, have dinner, switch on the box, get your dose of latest narrative, and then go to sleep, and then wake up and repeat. But the good news is that an increasing number of people are starting to take an interest. And it doesn't matter what you take an interest in, because there's a whole range of subjects, but it's imperative that people take an interest in something, because the agenda is accelerating at a phenomenal rate of knots. And that agenda isn't in your best interests, my best interests, or certainly the best interests of the upcoming generations. And so if we decide that we're not going to participate, then we have to acknowledge that we are condemning future generations to lives of unimaginable, abject misery. So, time to get involved, empower yourselves, empower your community, and hold those who are our elected representatives to account. They stood for office for a reason, and now is the time that they have to demonstrate that they are fit for office. You have a great day, and hopefully I'll see you tomorrow evening, 7:30, for an episode of Humanity vs Insanity. If not, I'll catch you with you on Monday morning at 8:30 a.m. You take care now.